any other player, the goal that Chelsea conceded, the Curtis Jones winner, if that had been Trent Alexander-Arnold's mistake, he would have got slaughtered. Absolutely slaughtered from pillar to post.
That's 5 years of winning every single individual event you put your name in for.
We're going to sing the national anthem in German just to really make him feel comfortable, Mr. Tuchel.
The number of people that play golf, the lowest ratio of people that view golf and watch golf. Can you hear the popping?
No, I can't, mate.
Oh, damn it.
Let's start with there on Not Another Sports Pod, because Ollie Wilson, who's 36, mate, has just spent the last minute munching down some candy floss flavoured sweeties, I think, that he got from the weekend, and he's very excited, and he just asked me if I could hear the popping of the sweets across the mic, which I could not, Ollie. That's the little rock and roll backdrop to Not Another Sports Pod, episode number 17, I think.
Yeah, 17. It's a very different start from last week, where I was like, I wear the trousers on this podcast. Dave asking me what we're going to talk about and what order can we talk about it in. And now I'm an absolute juvenile man who's trying to eat slush puppy flavoured popping candy to start a podcast. All right, you win this round, Windsor. You win this round.
Where do you stand on Halloween, Ollie? Because I just got back from the US over the weekend, and I actually don't mind the US being obsessed with Halloween. It's their thing, 7-foot skeletons outside suburban houses 2 weeks before Halloween, fine, but the fact that it's crept into British culture, I don't personally rate.
No, I'm not a fan of Halloween in general. I actually never really celebrated Halloween at all, even as a kid. I've never been trick-or-treating. That is my claim to fame.
No, my respect has gone up, I agree. But are you going to leave some... You live in sort of a nice part of the country. Are you going to leave out some... What about some fruit? I often think maybe leave out a little fruit salad, a little medley.
Oh, you're begging for an egg-in if you if you leave out a bit of fruit salad or something. That's not what the kids want.
Well, no, but it's what's good for them, Ollie. A few little tangerines.
Yeah, but I'm not here to do what's good for other people. I can barely do... We saw last time when I was hanging completely on a Monday morning and we did this podcast that I cannot look after myself, let alone be encouraging others to look after themselves.
It's tough out there. It's tough out there. Before we dive in and chat Premier League, Ollie, and all other sports, can I just talk about a newfound respect I've got for a certain sport, and that's baseball, because I had to go in the batting cages out in Boston. And you think, yeah, sure, I've got decent hand-eye coordination. Like, how difficult can this be? It's like quite a chunky bat. The ball's coming, and then you get in those batting cages. Have you ever done it in the US? Because I know you're quite a big, you're a big US sports fan. But, I mean, the first sort of 10 balls that come at you are very humbling. But then you find a rhythm, and it's very, very enjoyable. But if you're ever in the US, I would and enjoy the sport. Wander into the batting cages for 45 minutes, and it definitely gives you a new appreciation of that sport.
What speed did you have the batting cage?
You do it the whole way, don't you? So you start down at 35 just to get a swing for it, and then at the end, 90, whatever it is, 90 mile an hour, like bullets are coming at you, whatever the max was, and you're desperately trying to make some contact as a bunch of like Americans look on at the silly Brits giggling and trying to get, some kind of hand-eye coordination.
Look at his stance. Hasn't even got his elbow high in the back and stuff like that. I think baseball, actually, I mean, I struggle to watch it on TV. I love going to a baseball game in the US because it's dirt cheap. You can get a ticket for like $10. Once you're in, they basically, if there are seats available, you can just mosey around to anywhere that you want to sit, even if it's not exactly your seat. It's good food, it's good beer, and it's a bit like a shortened day at the cricket. And I've always had a respect for it because when you say the bat is chunky, it's smaller than a cricket bat.
True.
And it's circular, so it's difficult to make really clean contact because you can easily come off the top or off the bottom and dig it straight into the ground or ping it off behind you. And the ball's not exactly sizable either. I mean, softball, that's a different equation. That is a piece of pea to be able to do, to be honest. Softball,
hurts your hands, the old batting cages as well.
Vibrations down.
If you connect wrong, if you connect correctly and it hits a sweet spot, it doesn't hurt your hand at all because that's what's supposed to happen, right? But if it hits the hand or something, it really goes through the hand.
But I would say baseball's maybe almost too difficult because these pitchers can throw, 98 mile an hour fastballs. They can put crazy bend, swerve on it, knuckleballs, all that to make life even more difficult. And hitting a ball is difficult enough anyway. So what you have is 3 hours of a very, very tough thing trying to be done over 18 innings, 9 for each team. And a lot of the time, any sort of great contact happens very rarely. So you get a lot of low-scoring games, which is why it's really exciting when you see like a 7-5 result in baseball. But more often than not, when you go to baseball, you've been there for 3 hours and you maybe see one or two people round the bases, let alone come close to hitting a home run. It's so tough. So tough.
Let's talk Premier League, Ollie. Look, Do you think ourselves and most other people have completely misread this Premier League title race in the sense that pre-season, all the talk was about, we know what Manchester City are going to do, 90-plus points. Arsenal, pretty close to flawless last season, are going to do something similar. And it's going to be this, who can be the most perfect over 38 games, right? That was the entire narrative. And that's understandable because you're looking at the last few seasons, you're looking at the two squads, you're looking at the two coaches, and that's what you would have predicted. But, what are we, 8 games into the season? Something different's happening, isn't it? Something different's happening. We're watching a Manchester City without Rodri that are going for 5 Premier League titles on the spin. And they're a little bit more ragged than usual. They're a little bit more unpredictable. They're a little bit less polished. Then you've got an Arsenal side that we thought were so close to City. And they were, judged by the points last season. But you've got an Arsenal side that's suddenly a little bit emotional. We talked about Mikel Arteta in the past, and I certainly feel like it's a top-down thing, the fact that Arsenal are so emotional, and that emotion has resulted in red cards, which has then equated to drop points. So you've got these two sides that we thought would be perfect that aren't perfect. And then you've got Liverpool that we all assume, because of Klopp going out and Arne Slot coming in, would be, let's say, 8 to 10 points worse off just because of the transition. But that hasn't really happened because he's got the same squad, everyone more or less is fit, and he's brought in a defensive solidity we haven't seen really under Liverpool, whilst keeping all their attacking players in place. So my question to you, I guess, Ollie, is this a different title race than we were anticipating? Is this going to be you win the title with 84 points and maybe there's 3 or 4 sides in it?
I don't think it's a different title race to what we anticipated, because I think if Rodri was still fit, we'd be seeing a very strong Manchester City side, stronger results, stronger performances than we've seen in the last couple of weeks, obviously with the international break separating them. And City are still going to be there or thereabouts come the end of the season. That is a 100% guarantee. I think we just underestimated Liverpool's ability to get into the title race more than anything else. And I don't think anybody expected that defensive solidarity that we've seen Arne Slot has brought into this Liverpool back line. And obviously they're very strong remnants of what Klopp built, but we associate Klopp with rock and roll football, scoring goals, not necessarily and I'm not saying it's a Catenaccio side that Liverpool are playing right now in terms of the style of football, but the defensive solidarity and only conceding 3 goals at the moment in 8 games in the Premier League is unbelievably good. And I don't think we've seen a defensive side in the Premier League for a long time. I think defensive quality is something that has been lacking from Premier League football for a number of years as well. We've been constantly discussing about goalkeepers and centre-backs that can be playmakers and almost playing a number 10 role from the back line, all this kind of stuff. And it's like, no, I want some teams that just don't concede. Because if you don't concede, you only need 1 goal, it's fine. And that's all Liverpool need to do. Now, they will score more than perhaps a cliche Italian Catenaccio side, as we've discussed already. So I just think we underestimated how good this Liverpool side could be in terms of their defensive fortitude. And then, as I think I alluded to at the very beginning of the season, when you were writing off the title race after week 2 with Manchester City, strange things can happen. And that Rodri injury is the strange curveball that's going to keep this a very entertaining season. I think what we're seeing, however, with Mikel Arteta and Arsenal, this is a side that you might be right about are playing too emotionally, because there's a discipline problem in this Arsenal team in terms of the number of cards picked up, the number of red cards, down to 10 men again this weekend against Bournemouth in that loss. And that's a real problem, because injuries are one thing, you can't control that. Discipline and getting sent off, players should and managers should be able to control and make sure that doesn't happen. And missing key men in key moments is going to be a real problem for Arsenal if they can't get their disciplinary record kind of under wraps.
One thing I also thought about Liverpool's defensive record is, 3 goals conceded in 8 games, as you said. Trent Alexander-Arnold, part of that back 4. I don't know. I feel like he played really well against Chelsea, and any other player, the goal that Chelsea conceded, the Curtis Jones winner, if that had been Trent Alexander-Arnold's mistake, he would have got slaughtered. Absolutely slaughtered from pillar to post. And I do think there's just this kind of thing where you assume something about a footballer, you've decided that's what he's like, and that's the narrative you stick by. But he was great defensively at the weekend. He's part of that defensive lineup that's the best defence in the league by a mile at the moment. So I do think that's worth keeping tabs on throughout the course of the Premier League season.
I just wonder if you've bought yourself a drum kit, because you keep banging this Trent Alexander-Arnold's the best defender drum, week in, week out.
I know you're not big on individual awards in the beautiful game, are you, Ollie? You're more about the collective socialist that you are. But I do think something that's really interesting. When people always talk about the most influential player in Premier League history. And it's a great debate because the word influence and influential is very, very easy to look at from a million different angles. And you'll hear kind of abstract contributions to that debate. And then you've got like a Cantona or Bergkamp or something like that. But ultimately, influence is goals and assists mainly, or preventing goals. And so I often do look at the goals and assists all-time Premier League tally. And just one thing that did catch my eye this weekend, understandably Alan Shearer's at the top of that because he scored so many goals, 324 goals and assists, 260 goals and 64 assists. And then you've got Wayne Rooney and Frank Lampard's probably the most impressive here because he got 177 Premier League goals and 102 assists. But Mo Salah is creeping up that order. He's currently 8th in the list of the all-time Premier League list of goals and assists. 162 goals, 74 assists. And if he does sign another contract at Liverpool, he's not going to get to the top of that list, but another couple of seasons, bearing in mind he averages 30 goals and assists per season. So another 2 seasons at Liverpool, and he's kind of nudging into second, third place in that all-time Premier League goals and assists chart. And so when people eventually do have that conversation about the most influential Premier League footballer of all time, I do think Mo Salah will be very much part of the debate.
He'll have to be. It raises the question, though, of what could have been with Mo Salah. Obviously, was at Chelsea, moved away, went to Fiorentina, rebuilt his reputation, came back to Liverpool, and then how much further Salah would be up that list if it had clicked at Chelsea or if he just signed at Liverpool. And maybe he wasn't right at that point, and obviously players grow, adapt, get better as they get older, get wiser. But for whatever reason, with it not working out at Chelsea and having that time away in Italy as well, like, that could be a huge tally already and be creeping even further and further up. What I will say is I don't like the phrase influence, because I think you can put goals and assists are certainly influential, but influence implies an intangible, so to speak, a leadership role, the guy that's seen but gets on with things, like a Paul Scholes never got the credit that he should have done. And I think everybody was shocked when that quote came out from Zidane when somebody asked him, what's it like being the best player on the pitch? And he turned around and said, well, why don't you ask Paul Scholes? Because Zidane felt that Scholes was the guy that pulled everything together at Manchester United. You could even look at Roy Keane, who, look, let's face it, him and Vieira don't have the goals and assist tallies, but without a doubt, 2 of those most influential figures that you'll ever have in Premier League history for what they did for their respective clubs in terms of commanding a midfield, etc. So that is a longer debate to be had at some point, and maybe we'll have to have like a special podcast, if you will, Dave, if you want to sit down and have a chat about the most influential.
They're all special, yeah. No, I tell you,
here we go, and you're calling me the communist, just sharing the love to everyone evenly.
If influence was just goals and assists, then it's not a debate, right? You just look at the top of who's scored the most goals and who's got the most assists, and that's the end of the conversation. So I take your point. It's also how, maybe a player comes in a January transfer window or something like that and influences the culture of the club and things like that. So yeah, as you say, very intangible notions. Should we move on then to a bit of other sport, Ollie?
Well, it's interesting because I'm gonna be very open. I haven't seen a single bit of the Premier League action.
That's what we provide on Not Another Sports Pod, by the way. Real cutting edge, in depth, covered it all analysis of the big sporting stories of the weekend.
Well, I think I've done about 20 hours of broadcasting in the last 4 days, maybe longer, and none of it was on top tier football. Let's put it that way. Plus 6, 7, 8, 9 hours driving all over the country. Look, I'm a will work for food kind of guy, Dave, as you know. So my last few days has taken me across the world of triathlon, the world of the Vanarama National League, and the world of the American football back in the UK and in London for the final weekend of the season. And there's so much more interesting conversation pieces from around pretty much anywhere else except the Premier League right now in terms of the world of sport. And I don't really know where you want to necessarily start off at, but I wouldn't mind kicking off with what I did on Thursday and Friday, which is covering a niche sport, which is always quite a fun one. And Dave, both you and I have done some pretty rogue sports in our time in terms of the events that we've covered and trips that we've been able to do with work. I mean, you could even consider the Comebol Sudamericana is pretty niche because there are some people that just don't know that competition exists because it is so much.
Get stuck into it. Watch the highlights show this Friday. You'll hear Mr. Wilson's voice. No, Ollie, go for it. Tell us the niche sports you covered.
Well, the most niche sport I think I've covered is the European figure skating. I don't think there'll be one that comes around. But I was covering the Para World Championships for World Triathlon this weekend. And it is a mad thing to try and get your head around, because you have 2 races for men and women in every single category. So you start off with a wheelchair event, swimming, then helped out of the water into a wheelchair as they then go off to a handbike in transition, handbike on the bike course, and then they go on to the racing wheelchair for the run. So you have the men and women doing that. Then you have the visually impaired category, where you've got men and women doing the triathlon. Every single one of them's got a guide to help them round. And then you have the men and women's PTS 5, 4, 3, and 2 categories, which is all based around on neurological and the kind of extent of your amputation or your disability, depends on what category you fall into. Some of these athletes are absolutely incredible in terms of how dominant they are at their sport. It's incredible anyway, because I couldn't run a triathlon and be involved in a triathlon that's a sprint or Olympic distance in any state at the moment. But there's a guy called Alexis Hanquinquant, right? And this comes into my other talking point that I asked you about, which was crazy records. He's a French para-triathlete in the PTS 4 category. When do you think the last time he lost an event is?
This is the men's senior para-triathlon.
Yeah, para-triathlon, the PTS 4 category in terms of disability, an international level. When do you think he last lost an event?
How old is he? This is going to be tricky now. Let me just give me 2 questions here, Ollie, and you can have a little look while I'm formulating these questions in my mind. My 2 questions would be: what's his age, and how regular are these events? Are we talking every month, or are there 2 or 3 big ones a year?
So there are big events kind of throughout the year, in terms of there'll be an event in Montreal. You obviously have the build up to the Paralympics as well. And then you get the World Championships every single year. So there's probably about 6 or 7 major events, but there's a lot of smaller events as well that take place.
I think, Ollie, that triathlon is so varied in terms of the discipline. There must be so many different variables. And if there are like more than a handful of events per year, he cannot have gone more than 3 years undefeated.
So Alexis Hanquinquant, born in 1985, the Frenchman. The last time he lost an individual event, that doesn't include the para-triathlon relays, etc., August 2019. That's 5 years of winning every single individual event you put your name in for.
Can we get him on the pod?
Absolutely. I mean, I'd love to. He's a wonderfully happy guy. He's won his 7th world title this weekend. He genuinely, in the post-race interview, said, I want to do 10. I want to do La Decima, basically. Which I thought, at that age, pushing 40 now, that is incredibly impressive. I just think it's wild to have gone through that period of time and never lost. I mean, it's not you sometimes don't get like a massive field, obviously. So there's sometimes only about 10 other athletes in that category that he's racing against. But that means there's no error. There's no little injury that keeps him out. There's no slip up. There's everything.
And the mental
crisp
side
and
of
clean.
it. There's no event where he thinks, I'm not that up for it. This is going on in my personal life, and actually my ankle does kind of hurt. That relentless consistency is so impressive, and I think we need to shine more of a light on this achievement, Ollie. And yeah, I was deadly serious when I said maybe if we can get him on a kind of a special edition of the pod one day. 2 things popped into my mind when you were telling me this. First of all, do you go back and listen to, I think, last pod or the 2 pods ago when we were reflecting on Rafael Nadal's retirement and his domination at the French Open, because that kind of slots in nicely there. The second thing is, we live in a great era, man, 2024. The fact that these events exist, like you go back to 1954, there obviously isn't the same facilities for triathlons to take place so regularly on such a good scale, and to have a professional broadcaster on it and it be televised, all this kind of thing. I mean, there's no way that existed in 1954, or probably didn't even exist, Ollie, until the last 20 or 30 years, right? So I do think that there's so many criticisms of modern sport, but let's not forget that there is massive progress in so many of these sports to shine a light on some incredible, crazy accomplishments. So that's something that the sporting world can be proud of, and the event itself and the triathlon world, Ollie, which I know you're part of and been broadcasting for a few years now on that. It's really impressive. Have you met him? Sorry, did you interview him, or how does it work, Ollie? For those listening you're commentating on the event live.
Yeah, I've never had the chance to meet Alexis in the flesh. just because we haven't been doing the para triathlons on site, unfortunately. But even if we were on site, I'll break some of the mystique slightly. You are still in a booth in the complex when you go and do these triathlons on site. So you're broadcasting for, particularly with the para triathlon events, because there are all these races taking place at staggered starts, but it gets very busy and very clustered out there on the course. So you're broadcasting for about 5 hours straight, and there's somebody else, generally a reporter, doing trackside kind of interviews as they've crossed the line, etc. So you don't really get the opportunity to meet many of these athletes, although you do catch up with some of them when you're on site round about the place. I mean, I've had a bow bun with a couple of the elite athletes before when I was lucky enough to go out to Japan to cover one of these events. But no, in general, you don't get too many opportunities to kind of really speak candidly and off mic with them, or even on mic. But I mean, there's a lady called Susana Rodriguez who's in the visually impaired category in the women, and she again, like, I mean, obviously Alexis Hanquinquant did this as well, but a triple crown winner, which means you win the world champs, you win the paras, and you win your continents championships as well. And she's been the class of the visually impaired athletes. Dave Ellis as well finally got his a world championship again, back after having a silver in Paris this year in the visually impaired. I mean, the idea of doing a triathlon with a visual impairment and having the synchronicity to be with a guide on a tandem bike for two, going around a technical street circuit with hairpin bends, etc. It's so impressive. And I think we do get caught up, going back to kind of niche sports, we get caught up so much in the big storylines from the Premier League. And look, I was on a broadcast on Sunday where I had somebody alongside me who was trying to like make up his own kind of storylines with the broadcast, of reading too much into like the teams coming out and, I don't think they look up for this at all. And it's like, it's just not the case. They're a professional sports team. They're up for trying to find a victory in front of 86,000 people for sure. And when you just take a step back and start working on some maybe slightly more rogue and unseen and certainly not as celebrated events, you find some much nicer, more kind of valid stories that you can get like your teeth into over a weekend or two.
Yeah, and that's why this is not another sports pod, right? Otherwise we would have named it Not Another Football Pod. So yeah, do keep nudging these, Ollie. One sport that many of you may have heard of.
What's the most niche one you've done?
Right, so many of you may have heard of a highlight show called Trans World Sport. It's actually the longest running consecutive sports highlight show in the world. Began in 1986. The year I was born, nonetheless. Anyway, lots of my knowledge generation listen to this on Channel 4, and I've had the sort of privilege the last 6 months or so to be one of the voiceover artists, if it's, I know we both wince at that word, but one of the voiceover people on the...
Your talent, that's what you are, Dave. You've got Ryder.
And there's some weird and wacky stuff from around the world, the Conquer World Championships. I don't know if you want to call that a sport or not. But one I love is the Cliff Diving World Championships. So it's like diving, but off a cliff, and it's sponsored by Red Bull, obviously. So it's the Red Bull Cliff Diving World Championships, and they go to these incredible locations around the world, and they dive off cliffs with all the usual stuff with a dive, right? So all the pikes and the somersaults and the degree of difficulty things. And there's a great one in the south of Italy where lots of the homes kind of overhang off the edge of the cliff, and the competitors go through the houses of these like little old Italian grannies to get to the balcony of the house to then dive off. And it's a really beautiful scene. The name of the Italian town escapes me, but yeah, I really enjoyed doing that one. Some of the visuals on that are top class.
Mate, they do that at Luton. You have to go through the terrace to go through the turnstiles at Kenilworth Road, mate. I mean, it's the same, isn't it? The picturesque Italian cliffside village and Kenilworth Road, mate. No, it's interesting. Jurgen Klopp, was he there for the cliff diving Red Bull? I mean, he's obviously a big Red Bull guy. He loves the energy drink, loves what they're doing across the sports world. I'm just surprised he wasn't there
in an
Red ambassadorial role.
He just loves the brand. Let's talk golf, Ollie. Two big golf stories then. New Live Golf CEO is one thing. The second thing that popped off on the WhatsApp group when we were discussing the pod is Ryder Cup tickets are £750. Is that right? Or dollars?
Yeah, $750.
Dollars, okay.
This is the problem I have. Golf getting popular is fantastic in that, like, we're seeing YouTubers all over the place making content, whether you like it or not. Look, it's generating fans of the sport. I still think golf is probably the sport that has, for the number of people that play golf, the lowest ratio of people that view golf and watch golf. Because I think if you play football in five-a-side, you watch football on a Saturday or a Sunday on a Champions League. But I know there are a lot of golfers out there that don't watch the PGA not many people are seemingly watching live anyway, but and aren't really interested in the sport itself. They just like playing it, which is I always find quite interesting. But as golf is getting popular, there's a bigger pull. There's more kind of drama and attention around things like Ryder Cups, major championships. And I've loved the fact that I've been able to go to the Open for the last couple of years for tickets on the first day, on the Thursday, and the final day for between £80 and £100, which when you're going to be there for 8 hours, I think is some of the best value for money that you can get for a sporting event, without a doubt. You can get to the Open on a Thursday from 6 a.m. and not leave until 8:30 p.m. when the last golfers are coming in. 14 hours for 80 quid is value for money. But to see that the Ryder Cup has said that they consider themselves a tier 1 category sporting event, and that regular punters will be paying $750 to get a ticket at Bethpage Black, is really sad to me. Because I know big events are going to be expensive because you've got the demand. If you've got the demand, you can charge what you want. But I don't want to see people priced out of golf when golf already has that image of being an elitist sport. Clubs can be expensive. You can thankfully buy a lot of second-hand clubs that will work wonders for you on the course for reasonably cheap now. But it's still got that entitled, I guess, aura around it. And to suddenly then start charging this much is pretty astonishing and pretty ugly to me as well. Because the Ryder Cup in particular is meant to be about joining all of these nations in Europe together and obviously pitting the US against Europe and bringing the kind of golf world into one big team golf event that, until Liv came along, was pretty unique in terms of the sport. There's the President's Cup and the Ryder Cup. And now it's like, right, let's just cash in. Let's just cash in on the fans.
This is just for clarity. This is in the US next year, right?
Yeah, Bethpage Black, which is it's actually a golf course you can play. It's not like one of these elite country club places. It's just outside of New York. And yeah, the next Ryder Cup will be next summer.
I mean, if you think, Ollie, $750, what's that? About £650. I mean, it's a day's entertainment, right? But you could go on, hit me.
Oh, it's not. This is the thing about the Ryder Cup, because you have the morning, it's broken up into 4 balls. So you have like four ball matches taking place. So there's so many people in the event in terms of fans and supporters, but there's so little golf action because there's a morning and an afternoon session, and it's only on the Sunday that every single golfer is playing in a singles match, 1 against 1, going around the course, and it feels a bit more like a major tournament, an Open, a Masters, etc. So you're actually now going to be paying so much for much less golf than you'd normally see at a regular competition, and that's also what stings, because it isn't like you're getting able to walk around to every single golf hole and check out the green, check out the tee box of every single one, and probably see every player that you want to be able to see at various points around the course. It is a limited time frame.
6 hours, something
you
like
have
that.
Yeah, and you have to plot your way around the course of like, right, we'll go and set up camp at 3. Once we're on the 3rd green, we'll try and nip across to 12 and wait there for 3 hours for them to come through and play 12, rather than being able to follow groups around, etc. Because it's so busy and there's such a small amount of golf being played at once on those first 2 days.
I mean, I'm trying to make some kind of case for the defence here, but I just can't. I mean, that is so much money for 2/3 of a day's entertainment. You can't compare it to anything. I guess the only case for the defence would be the Ryder Cups every 4 years, right? So it's it's so rare that it takes place. But even so, I mean, an Oasis concert ticket, Ollie, which is maybe 3 or 4 hours, probably less, it won't touch that. I mean, outside of sport, if you went to like a spa day in New York or London, really high end, then went to the theatre, then had dinner, it still wouldn't touch that price. So I don't know. That's
well, and it's the fact, if you bought an Oasis, even if you bought an Oasis ticket for £500, say, which is an extraordinary amount of money just for a concert for a few hours, at least you would see the whole of that Oasis concert. You wouldn't see little bits of it, or be straining to get your neck over the guy in front just to catch a glimpse of that tournament. And that's one of the troubles that you could face going to a Ryder Cup. I mean, I've put my name in the ballot for tickets, and then it was kind of hidden in the frequently asked questions section, actually, how much the tickets were going to be. And everyone was like, oh, we've found it. Jesus. So it's such a hard case to make, as you say. And there are some things in life that are definitely worth spending the money on up to a point. And I just don't see that for a lot of even really avid golf fans being enough of a drive to go. Look, again, it's every 2 years, 2 years in the US, then it comes back to Europe. So you basically get it on your doorstep once every 4 years, as you say. So you don't get many opportunities to do it. If you're going to do it in the US, obviously you've got then the flights and accommodation. It's in New York this year, which is an expensive city. So if you're going to stay anywhere near that city, you're going to be spending a lot of money for 4 or 5 days of accommodation, plus then a ticket just for one day being $750, plus food, drink, etc.
New York, Ollie, just because I was there 2 days ago, honestly, you buy anything and you think, oh, so everyone here's a millionaire. Like that's the only logical. Obviously, they're not, but like logically, you walk around and think, okay, right, so everyone's just a millionaire here, are they? Like that can be the only way you could live and have a quote unquote nice life there.
And there's an interesting caveat to all of this: is that you have the Masters, which is considered the untouchable golf course, if you will. You can only play if you're invited on by a member. You're not allowed to bring another guest unless the member has an official invite. You get invited to become a member, so it's a very, very elite club. You can't just buy your way in. And the Masters, when it opens its doors to the public and has the Masters golf competition, their concessions are like $3 beers. They're cheaper than most bars in the US. They do sandwiches for like $5, so you can eat and drink because they recognize that, yeah, the tickets are quite expensive and coming here is expensive, but at least like the concessions are way down as well. And the Ryder Cup isn't going to be like that. It's going to be boom, boom, boom. We are just going to jack everything up. It's going to be one of the most expensive weekends of golf that you could probably be involved in unless you were a Saudi backer of Live Golf, which every weekend's very expensive when, Dustin Johnson's being paid $700 million to be there.
Nice segue to Live Golf then. New CEO, Ollie.
Yeah, Greg Norman, it's rumoured that he is going to be stepping away and moved on elsewhere in Live Golf. Greg Norman was one of the more vocal agitators against the PGA, which is, I think, a clear indication and a sign that if you take the agitators out of the equation on that bargaining table coming together, that now there might be a resolution to the problem that we have in world golf, which is having the PGA and Live at odds with each other. And I think there's now going to start to be a bit more of a marriage of the two companies over the next 12 months or so. It's just quite interesting because, again, Greg Norman was one of the instigators of Live Golf. He was the kind of the first face of it before then Phil Mickelson got involved as well. And Greg Norman's had a pretty illustrious golfing career for himself, a very well-known name in the sport. So it's interesting that Live are kind of going, right, it's probably better for everybody if we start to unite with the PGA
positive,
Tour.
right? For the sport as a whole.
Yeah, I think it is because
Live Golf's not. Live Golf's here to, it's here to stay. It is what it is. So, yeah, it sounds like a positive move.
Yeah, I think it's a positive to get everybody back because we want to have golf competitions where you've got the best players in the world week in, week out, as we used to have on the PGA Tour. I think the difference is that if they become kind of slightly more linked together intrinsically, that becomes a bit of it gives that validity to Live Golf, which I'm not necessarily a big fan of just because I don't like the product more than anything else. I don't enjoy the team aspects. It's not been explained to me very well, so I don't really get what's going on with the team aspect. And I thought that was the main point of Live Golf, to create that Ryder Cup kind of partisanship out there on the golf course, and not really the case. And so I'm still iffy about whether I like it or not, but we'll see. It's just a clear indication that the melting pot is starting to come together, so to speak.
F1 was in Austin this week, Ollie. Talk us through it.
Yeah. I mean, this was something that I've been kind of catching up on over the last few hours or so, last night and this morning, as sprint race weekend. I don't know if you have any feelings on sprint races in Formula One. I know you're a traditionalist when it comes to sport, but you're also a man of the future, Dave Windsor, and you like to find the adaptability in everything to modernise the ancient games, whether it's the Olympics or anything else. But
there's no choice either way, I guess. I think you've always got to be thinking about what the next generation are going to watch and how they're going to engage in certain sports. And I think you also need to recognise that younger generations are not our generation. They're certainly not our parents' generation. And they consume everything differently, and they consume everything in short, snappy, fast, exciting, bite-sized, 7-second explosions that will hijack your dopamine, probably ruin your brain forever, but you might have a little bit of fun in the meantime. So, yeah, I don't know. Is that the way it's all going?
Well, the sprint race has been around for a few years now, and they're very much seen as it's a nice idea. The teams aren't necessarily building their race weekend around sprint races. It's all about the main Grand Prix on the Sunday, which provided plenty of drama. Max Verstappen and Lando Norris are in this kind of heated battle for the world title. Norris needs to outdo Verstappen at every single race to have a chance of going from second to first in the Drivers' World Championship and knocking the Dutchman off. And Verstappen got ballsy around the first corner, taking the inside line as tight on the inside as he could go and forcing Norris wide off the track slightly, but it was deemed that Norris and Verstappen, that was all kind of legal and fine. And then it happened again later on in the race, Norris making a dive, and he was given a 5-second penalty for not relinquishing the place back at the end of the Grand Prix, which meant that Norris was then knocked behind Max Verstappen. He fell to fourth off the podium. The two Ferraris taking the victory, and it's a weekend squandered for McLaren in a Grand Prix that's kind of their home Grand Prix to some extent. McLaren are based in Woking here in the UK, but their CEO, Zach Brown, is obviously a big, powerful American guy who's got his fingers in many pies when it comes to motor racing with McLaren. And so they wanted to put on a show, particularly with this title fight taking place in the peak of motorsport, basically. And it's a frustrating weekend for them. And it raises more questions about whether Max Verstappen is a bully out there on the circuit, because he has this tendency to get away with maybe diving up the inside of drivers, forcing them off the track, and then doing the opposite and holding his own too much when another driver is clearly trying to make an overtaking move, and Verstappen's just not relinquishing and not giving the space and the safe space that is meant to be provided for drivers when they are making those manoeuvres.
You say get away, Ollie. What do you mean?
Well, so they actually brought in a rule at one point that was kind of jokingly known as the Max Verstappen rule, because when he first came into the sport, he could drive an F1 car before he could drive a car on the road, Max Verstappen. He's been driving in Formula 1 since he was 17. It's outrageous. And he used to basically move under braking, which you're not meant to do. You're not meant to try and cover the guy who's coming up behind you to try and overtake you. Under braking, you pick whether you're taking the inside line or holding the racing line on the outside of the corner to take the apex, and you defend from that point. That's what it's meant to be. And it's very dangerous if cars start moving around under braking a lot, because other cars aren't expecting it. You don't know what you can do. And he caused a lot of incidents. And then in the big title battle between he and Lewis Hamilton in 2001, again, there were a number of incidents where, rightly or wrongly, you could argue Verstappen stuck his car into places, going into corners where it shouldn't have been put, basically being overly aggressive and then trying to barge drivers out of the way, trying to make overtaking manoeuvres. It happened at Monza when he came darting out of the pit lane and went right up the inside of Lewis Hamilton and ended up knocking both of them out of the race with that, and could have killed Lewis Hamilton because his rear wheel was on the helmet of Hamilton's car, and if he just taps the accelerator and puts any sort of traction into that rear wheel and gets it moving, Lewis Hamilton's a dead man, without a doubt. So it got pretty testy on quite a few occasions. And since he's been dominating Formula 1 over the last few years, it's all very nice and tidy. Not really any complaints because Red Bull have been in control. And then this car has been getting worse and worse this season, and McLaren have been getting better and better and eating into that gap. And suddenly, we saw it in Austria earlier this year when Verstappen almost took Norris out of the race, and when Norris was making an overtaking move on the outside, he tends to get his elbows out a bit too much, considered what is meant to be fair in the sport. And for some reason, he doesn't get the same punishments that other drivers seem to get. And maybe it's because he's a big name, maybe it's the weight that Red Bull have, or maybe it's just because the stewards on that day feel that he is driving fairer than perhaps others have done in the past. But yeah, it's just a bit more controversy and adds a bit of fuel to the fire for particularly two drivers, Lando Norris and Max Verstappen, very good friends when not racing each other. Get on very well. They both have this kind of e-racing, e-sim kind of extracurricular activities where they're up driving on a Saturday night when it's not a race weekend till like 2-3 o'clock in the morning in these like crazy e-sim long distance events, etc. Norris, I think, has got a YouTube channel as well that's really popular. And so they have that kind of similar almost F1 nerdiness about them. And it's just interesting to see that they're getting more and more pissed off with each other as well, though, as the claws start to come out on the track.
How many events are there per year?
24 races.
24 races. And when you started following the sport, let's say 20 years ago, how many were there then?
Oh, there were like 12.
Yeah, okay. So
I mean, we've had some seasons that have felt dramatically short, where there's like 10 or 11 or something like that. It was normally about 12 to 15 races, I think, most years. Now, it feels like overkill. A little bit. 24 races.
It's not going more than that, right? Like, that'll be the plateau for a few years.
It can't. They have an agreement that because the amount of travel, global travel in particular, and hauling all of this freight around, I mean, they try and make it as carbon neutral as possible by keeping it in various areas. You have the European run, which somehow includes Canada as well, but that doesn't then include Miami, because Miami wants to be at this point in the year to have its showcase. LA wants to have Las Vegas wants its showcase at the end of the year, and Austin falls kind of in between both of those, when actually you should really have what would be like the trucking across America journey, which would be fantastic, starting in Miami and having Formula One as a convoy going down the freeways of the US to Vegas.
Oh, there's an idea.
With Austin, Texas in between. Yeah, it would look great. But because all the races want to have their own landmark moments in the year, they all want to be slightly more spread out and not necessarily grouped together, etc.
How do they lug the kit around? Is that there's a replica car then? One in Europe, one in Asia, one like that? Or is it one car that gets moved around the world?
I think because they can rebuild these cars, they take them apart, have all the pieces, put it all back together, kind of thing. So I think they have separate versions of freight that kind of go out on various legs of the season, and that kind of limits it. So they will drive a lot around Europe, for instance, from race to race, because it's easier. When it comes to Asia, then they'll have a huge amount of freight that gets flown out and bounces around from at race to race in that region. I mean, I sadly did watch like a 5-minute YouTube video once about like the freight haulage of Formula One. You know, one of those days when you've not got much else on the calendar.
Even if you do have a lot on, that still sounds like a good little watch for 5 minutes, you know.
But yeah, so they do, as I say, they do have different, like 3 or 4 different pools of freight that will be shipped out at various points to sections in the year. And they also have different teams now, in terms of there will be some engineers, etc., that go to every single race. But there's definitely will be like a group that I'm on the social media team for the next 4 races, but then I get the next 3 races off, for instance. Because if you think about it, I know there aren't many sports where you travel to 20 plus locations throughout the year, and 24 races is almost half a calendar year, right? So you're asking people to be away. It's not Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They've got to build the garage, they've got to build the car, they've got to put all of the advertising in and etc. around their garage. So they're getting out there, you know, a week beforehand sometimes, or at least flying in on the Monday, the main group of the team. They're there until the Sunday, they go home, they have a Monday off maybe, and then they're back out Tuesday somewhere else. And even the broadcast crews, you know, they have to get there, get set up. They'll be there from flying out on a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday at the event, and then fly home Sunday night or maybe Monday morning, Monday, Tuesday with the family, and then back off again. I mean, it is a wild ride indeed. And if you're doing that for half the year,
and there's always more people involved than you think. Like, that's not even mentioning like the media side of it, right, or the marketing. Like a lot of these people, that is you're giving up an awful lot. People outside the industry will always look in and be like, "What? I'd love to do that for a career. Like, that must be so great and stuff." But please do look at everything like that in sport from all angles, because that's a tough slog.
I mean, even the World Triathlon circuit, you know, there's hundreds of World Cups that take place, and we have broadcast crews out at every single World Cup. And you'll get athletes that will pick, like, I'm going to go on this Asian run of World Cups, because even though there's one in Tongyang, we've also got one in Weihai, one elsewhere. So there'll be like China, South Korea, Japan for 3 weeks. And then it'll be, right, and then I'm going to do a South American run. So I'm going to have a week off, and then I'll go down and do Brazil, Ecuador, Argentina, and the South American championships and stuff like that. And it's not just them, as you say, it's the people that run the whole show, the World Triathlon event people that have to be down there, at the majority of them. And they end up pinging all the way around the world. I mean, everyone thinks the travel and the glamour job for these athletes, etc. But I bet it gets a bit of a grind, particularly if you're not the athlete who's flying in private and you're the athlete.
Same with so many sports, man. Like the 98th best male tennis player in the world. Like, I mean, how glamorous do you think that is? Like flying to, you know, Medellin, Colombia to play on some outside court. You can't afford to take your trainer with you, so you've gone by yourself. You haven't seen your girlfriend in 3 weeks. Like, all this stuff is very rarely talked about, but it's a big deal. It doesn't matter how much money you're earning, although, you know, outside that top 1%, it's actually not as much as you think. That's a tough stuff.
I mean, I'm not one to gripe about this job too much, that even we do. But, you know, this weekend, for various reasons, I was in a hotel on Wednesday night in London, Thursday doing the triathlon all day, came home, did an hour on the bike, was back then on a train back into London, stay over Thursday night for an early start Friday. Friday I was broadcasting from 9 till 5 p.m. with a 40-minute break in between. Got home 7:30, 8 o'clock, then had to do work on the National League game that I was doing, get that prepped. 11 o'clock in the morning, 3.5, 4-hour drive up to the National League game. On that until 8 o'clock, back home at 11:30, staying up till 1 o'clock doing the NFL prep, then on a train 8 o'clock in the morning.
I know what you're all thinking. I'd love to see Ollie Wilson's tax return if that's his weekend, wouldn't we all?
This is an exceptionally busy weekend, but it means that I live with my girlfriend, and I saw her for about 2 hours in 4 days, if that. Because it's just late nights.
That's not to mention the 2 months in Argentina and, that kind of stuff.
Don't. We're not bringing that up around the house very often at all, particularly the potential of, well, if they do ask to go back.
Right. Before we talk Thomas Tuchel, Ollie, a celebrity's bought Tranmere Rovers. I've never heard of this fella, so you might have to educate me.
Yeah, I've never really heard. I heard Rocky has bought Tranmere Rovers, and I genuinely thought it was Sylvester Stallone. I was like...
But why? Rocky's
statue.
an American rapper or something, right? Yeah.
ASAP Rocky, I think is his stage name. But this cropped up this morning. Tranmere Rovers is set to be bought by ASAP Rocky.
ASAP Rocky, 15... I guess he's called, rather than...
Well, I like ASAP, to be honest.
You might have butchered the free-flowing ASAP Rocky, which is, I presume, he's not ASAP Rocky.
Well, if you want to correct me, do it ASAP, I guess. No, the £15 million deal after partnering with Donald Trump's former lawyer, Joe Tacopina. Again, don't know how to say that name, but he's Donald Trump's former lawyer, so I don't really care whether I'm butchering it or not. The rapper who's in a relationship with Rihanna, I've heard of her, is reportedly going to create a documentary. This is the bit that really irks me. It's not just celebrities buying, but this is the sentence that annoys the hell out of me right now. Going to create a documentary filming the future success at the club, similar to Welcome to Wrexham.
I mean...
Why are we allowing English football to basically... just be bought up by US celebrities and people with more money than sense?
Because that's what the free market looks like, Ollie. That's what capitalism
looks like. Yeah, but so they
like.
can just turn it into a TV show. Football doesn't need to have the drama of a TV show style edit. Football is dramatic. Just let the games play out. Run a club for the sake of running a club to win a championship. Don't run a club for the sake of, I want to have my documentary. That they are all doing. Ever since The Last Dance came out during COVID, every major athlete has a documentary crew around them. I think LeBron's got one at the moment. I think Dwayne Wade had one in his final
But LeBron, okay. You'll make your money back on that documentary. Tranmere Rovers? You're just hemorrhaging money then? You're not going to make money on that?
But wouldn't you have said that about Wrexham when it first started?
Yes, but it's not going to be that. It's not. I mean, he's not as famous as Ryan. Ryan Reynolds is mega, mega, mega famous. And Wrexham's the oldest football club in the world or something. Or is that right? Or something like that. So
one of, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. There should be a thing where if you buy a football club in England, you are not allowed legally to make a documentary for the first decade and see if you still want to buy it then.
I mean, we had the sodding Burnley one. And then, American footballers, J.J. Watt and loads of people kind of started investing in Burnley. J.J. Watt's wife, a former US soccer player, of course. So there was at least a slightly more of a link to soccer. But when you see it X, Y, or Z is looking to make a documentary about... It becomes a plaything. And these football clubs shouldn't be considered playthings for the rich and famous. And unfortunately, they continue to be at the highest level and at the lowest level as well. And it's sad because I remember Tranmere being kind of up in the slightly higher echelons of the English Football League when I was very, very young, and was a football name that you just knew as a young kid. You knew Tranmere Rovers was a big club, obviously very close to Liverpool and caught up in that catchment slightly. And there've been players that have gone from Tranmere to Liverpool and had great success. Wasn't Ian Rush at Tranmere at one point? Yeah. So you just learn about them, and they become a bit of your football kind of childhood growing up, even from just in your periphery. And now you find, it's sad all of these clubs are in such a financial crisis. But they're all in a financial crisis because this is happening at the top end of the business, and now it's all just filtering through to become a toy.
I get it, but I mean, should prime central London real estate be owned by Saudis and Chinese and Russian businessmen and sit empty for 11 months of the year? Should we be selling some of the assets in this country to overseas investors, like buildings and historical artifacts and stuff, which are now owned by people like shady figures in other countries. Should we be doing that? I don't know is the answer, because I don't know.
So there's an interesting side topic to this, right? So that, considering we both work in sports broadcasting, is one I'd really like to get your thoughts on. So not quite in the same way, but the great Tom Brady, who owns a portion of Birmingham City Football Club, fairly well known in the American sports world, I guess, and probably globally, I'd have thought. He's on a $325 million a year, or $325 million contract, not a year, with Fox Sports as their lead play-by-play analyst. So he's also working on that, right?
That's
he
a lot
has
of money.
Recently, yeah. I mean, he's the greatest player of all time, arguably. He's got the rings to back
scandal,
it.
But yeah, he's got to make that money back somehow.
He's going to get it back quickly. But he has just become a minority owner in the Las Vegas Raiders, which is an American football team. Now, this prohibits him. So when you're in the TV broadcasting world of the NFL, you get incredible access in terms of you get to go down to training and see elements of these teams' training that you wouldn't normally get to see as a member of the public or any other member of the media. They also have exclusive behind-the-scenes chats off the record. Some are taped, some certainly aren't, with coaches, star players, etc. And the access is insane. But with that access, they also get privy to information like what plays they're thinking about running, what they've been working in to install for their game plan for that game coming up. So when the Raiders, say, run a fake punt in the fourth quarter, Tom Brady can turn around and say, I tell you what, they told us they were working on something like this in training, and provide that little bit of insight during the broadcast, which is amazing because not even Premier League broadcasters get that sort of access really going into a Premier League weekend. Tom Brady, by becoming a minority owner in the Las Vegas Raiders, cannot enter another team's facility, see another team's practice session, talk to and be involved with other teams' players, etc. This is all part of what you have to adhere to as an owner and a part owner of any NFL team. So this isn't rules being put down on Tom Brady. This is rules put down by the NFL to everybody, and it affects everyone in the same way. But it means now Brady can't do his job that he's been paid an extraordinary amount of money to do, because he now can't sit in those TV production meetings and talk to those head coaches and those players and see training and analyse the game before going into work on the Sunday to actually call it with his main commentator.
That's very odd. Very odd. Was there not some kind of legal compromise between? I mean, when you're that big and that famous and the money's so big, surely there's huge discussions at the very top about how this is going to work.
The NFL is ruthless when it comes to things like ownership. They only let certain people become owners of franchises in the NFL. If you're the right kind of person that we want to have in, you can do it. But these are the laws you stick to. These are the laws of the game. In the same way, Brady and Belichick were done for Spygate when they were spying on other teams' practices when they were in player and head coach roles, obviously, in the sport. And they didn't just get a rap on the knuckles because they were so big. They got, fined. Brady was suspended, etc. Like, these things are really strictly adhered to by the NFL. And I think it's so peculiar that, again, a player is thinking more about, I'm taking business decisions and I want to be part ownership and have everything that comes with that, rather than actually doing his job. And I think it's really disgraceful and disrespectful to the art of broadcasting and commentary, because if you don't do the prep, and you're expected to have elite levels of prep when it comes to an American football game because you get all that behind-the-scenes access, you're not going to provide anything on the weekend. You're there to be that voice, that conduit, and provide that insight into the game from what you've seen in training.
Very weird. I'm going to keep an eye on this story, Ollie. Come back to me on it because I want to do a bit more of a deep dive into that, because that's insane. Let's wrap up nearing the hour mark. Let's wrap up with Thomas Tuchel, I was going to say New England boss, but he's the New England manager, but he's not really, because it's an 18-month contract, Ollie. And the story for me isn't that Thomas Tuchel's the England boss. It's not that he's German and he's the England boss. It's the fact that the FA have given him an 18-month contract, which takes us to the 2026 World Cup in the US. And it's not much of a vote of confidence for me. And it's probably very sensible from the FA, to be honest. I don't think there's any need to give someone you're not 100% sure about an 8-year contract. But I think, I don't want to go on and on about this, but I honestly do believe that the FA still think deep down they can get a Guardiola or a Klopp or someone else. There's obviously someone else they want. Because if Thomas Tuchel was the one they wanted, you don't give him an 18-month contract. I mean, there's absolutely nothing. Lee Carsey's been in charge for 6 months already. So he's a caretaker boss. What do you think? Why have England done that, Ollie? Because they don't really believe, right?
I think this is actually... I mean, we spoke earlier about adopting the more modern style to everything, right, when it comes to football. And I think the FA are taking the modern Premier League approach almost to football management and saying, our aim is to win a major tournament. There's a World Cup coming up. We have one of the best squads on the planet. So you, as a new manager, these are the expectations. And if you don't fulfill them, we'll go somewhere else. Because that's what happens at club level. That's what Chelsea will do. That's what Man City will do. If it's not working, you're gone. So we're just going to limit how much we have to give you as a back-end payout if you don't win a World Cup or decide you want to go and take a job elsewhere. And we're going to say, right, it's like new manager bounce. You've got 18 months to dedicate your life to this. And if you do it, you will be a hero. The statue will be built outside Wembley. You'll be beloved forever. You'll be able to live in London wherever you want, never buy a drink or a meal for the rest of your life. And you'll go down in English footballing history, which kind of goes down in world footballing history, really. The next manager that wins England a World Cup will just be living in the name forever, for eternity, across the globe. It's just a fact. We are a big footballing nation. So I don't mind it. I'm not against the idea at all. I don't see it as being short-sighted. I think it probably works out for Thomas Tuchel as well, because if he has 18 months in the job and it's absolute hell and he doesn't want to do it, then he can just say, look, I want to get back to club management, or I want to go somewhere else, or whatever. But I think it's a very smart move from the FA.
Agree.
And taking a modern approach to it.
I agree. Gareth Southgate reached 2 finals, didn't win either of them. So are we saying that Thomas Tuchel's got to win the World Cup or he doesn't get a new contract, essentially? And then the next coach that you bring on, Ollie gets 2 years to the next Euros. And if they don't win the Euros, then someone else gets to go.
Yeah, it might be.
I don't see why not.
I think this could be the way. This could be the way that the FA work for a long period of time. Having that long-term game plan with Southgate got so near and didn't quite get it over the line. And I think the difference is maybe it changes when the expectation of the squad drops. Because if we have a bad run of England players coming through the ranks, etc., and they're not up to this level of calibre, then that's when a longer deal is maybe needed. We're going to give you 4-5 years to build something. But right now, all the foundations and fixtures are in place. We need something now just to design the feng shui of the living room and paint the kitchen. That's what we need. Just somebody to finish it all off, put it all together so that it works. Because we have everything. The flat pack boxes are built, ready. It's now just put the furniture in and get it going. That's all that needs to be done.
Yeah, I think it's a smart move from the FA. I think it's an odd... It's only odd because we haven't seen it before. But when you say that maybe a coach will get a longer-term deal if the quality of the squad dropped. But the reality is, you look at the average age, certainly the attacking players in that England squad, the next 4 or 5 tournaments, well, let's say the next 3 or 4 tournaments, I mean, you've got a bunch of players at their absolute pomp, certainly going forwards, as I say. So we'll wait to see who comes through the ranks defensively. But, I mean, there's no reason, really, that we shouldn't be very strong for the next, sort of 8, 10, 12 years.
There's a decade.
Yeah.
There is a decade of football in terms of the attack for England to win a major tournament. If you're willing to go all guns blazing, if you're willing to maybe make some decisions that aren't going to be too popular, and if you're willing to stick Cole Palmer in for the next 3 years, probably.
Any problem with German as the England boss? Do you think the national team manager... Well, you roll your eyes on him. I mean, a lot of nations would never touch it. The vast majority of international football teams would never have a foreigner as their coach. We're obviously a more globalised nation than 99% of countries on planet Earth. Do you think that, a lot of countries wouldn't have it? I mean, can you ever imagine an Italian having... can you ever imagine Germany having a Dutch manager, right?
I think the difference is that in Germany, in Italy, in France, in Spain, the majority of the top managers in those countries at the highest league level are from Italy, Spain, Germany, etc. Like there are more Italian managers in Serie A than there are in English managers in the Premier League, particularly at the very top level. So, do you want to win with a manager that is consistently been coaching at the very top level, playing in Champions League, dealing with things like travel, dealing with rotating squads, getting the best out of the best players on the planet? Or do you want to go with an English guy because Sean Dyche probably deserved more of a shot at bigger clubs, etc.? But like, I would much rather have a Thomas Tuchel than a Sam Allardyce 2.0. You know what I mean? I never wanted Allardyce, and I couldn't have been almost happier that he got done after 2 weeks in charge for his nefarious dealings around English football. I didn't want to see that era come to fruition because,
I mean, there is something between Sam Allardyce and Thomas Tuchel. You don't have to be like a Del Boy dodgy dealer or like Thomas Tuchel, but yeah, I take.
Tell me, aside from maybe Eddie Howe.
Yeah, this is the thing.
He's the only one.
And Eddie Howe has not done enough to warrant getting the England manager's job, really, has he? I would have preferred to give it to Lee Carsley and FA save a shitload of money.
I mean, I would have been really interested to see Lee Carsley because he's come in as the guy that's like, oh, I don't give a crap. I'm literally going to do what I want with this England team. I may never have this opportunity again. And if you then gave him that opportunity, I'd love to know if he would continue down that vein of like, yeah, sod it, bring some of the under-19s up, like give him a go.
Well, he's got 2 more games in November, and there's a huge freedom with that. He got destroyed for playing all the attacking players against Greece and England lost, but people were crying out for that for quite a long time. And Carsley was like, yeah, go on, then we'll have a go. And as I said, like, not to bring it back to Trent again, but like playing Trent at left back, kind of wild. Like you're playing a world-class player and is out in a position that's completely, he'd never played before. So I'm interested to see what he does in November, Carsley. And also, I think he's proven to the FA, we'll wait to see how the 2 international games go in November, but he's a great backup, as in if Tuchel comes in and fails or whatever, at least they know, right, we can use Carsley for a few months while we try and get who we really want. And I don't think that's disrespectful for Carsley. It's a great deal. He's on the FA's books. He'll be on a great wage. He's part of the setup. It's just like an internal promotion and then demotion again.
Yeah, and you'll be able to keep bringing through and giving the youngsters an opportunity every so often that will not potentially get a sniff at any point because the manager like Thomas Tuchel will come in and be fully focused on it just being the best of the best in that senior side rather than going, give some of the young lads a go. The Nations League doesn't matter. Cannot stress that enough. No one cared about the Nations League. When it came in, no one really cared. And then for some reason, to its credit, it's a good tournament. Like, I like the idea of having a competitive game rather than a friendly game for sure. But at the same time, we're not, as international football fans, screaming out for stop all these years of hurt of not winning a major tournament and get the Nations League in the back pocket. Come on, boys. No one's screaming out for that. We want a European Championships or a World Cup. And the Nations League is a perfect time to just have a mess around, have a laugh. Have fun with it. Relax.
I think that's a totally fair point. You can't pretend the Nations League's got 100 years of history. It doesn't. But equally, is it better than the friendlies we saw before? Yes, it is. So, yeah, it kind of has a place. All right, England won the World Cup in 1966 and Thomas Tuchel's going to lead us to glory in 2026 is what we're saying.
Yeah, we're going to go across to America with only playing in a red strip, like the Red Coats. We're going to have red tracksuit tops going out, and we're going to take back football as we take back the US as well, led by a German manager.
We're going to sing the national anthem in German just to really make him feel comfortable, Mr. Tuchel.
Yeah, the national anthem of our Germanly historic royal family as well. So I mean, look, it's all coming together. England and Germany uniting finally.
If we win, if we finally it comes home and a German's brought it home. I mean, the Germans, I don't know if you only got any German mates, but mine, who I don't speak to that often, lived with them 15 years ago. Shout out to Jonas and Phil, who will never listen to this podcast. But they straight away, Ollie, I mean, like, didn't ask how I was, just straight away being like, oh, you need a German to save you, do you? Like, straight away on the WhatsApp. So, yeah, it's going to be pretty funny if, England fans won't care one jot if it's Thomas Tuchel who's the man.
No, we'll only care about the nationality of the manager if it goes wrong.
And then...
we should have never had a German. He doesn't care, does he? He doesn't care about this country like a real manager would, a Sam Allardyce would.
I don't think it won't be like that. Because it will, and it will be
Another sports bar.